Welcome back to another episode from Barking Bond's Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. Some days begin like any other, just routine, just a quiet drive through the countryside. But other days, something feels different, like the world is holding its breath. And as Officer Clara Bennett guided her patrol SUV along that narrow, cracked road under the sharp late-morning sun, she couldn't shake that strange, quiet feeling. The sky above was cloudless, a harsh blue, and the sun beat down on the fields like it had something to prove. Shadows stretched across the broken pavement, long and wavering, like ghosts of the night that had just ended. On either side of the road, dry grass shifted in the breeze, their golden blades whispering faint secrets to one another as they leaned and danced gently. Clara's eyes were heavy from the long shift behind her, another night full of noise and unanswered calls. She felt it in her bones, that tired pull. Her fingers gripped the wheel loosely. All she wanted now was to get back to the station, pour herself a strong coffee, sit in the break room, and not speak a word to anyone until the clock told her she could go home. The road stretched ahead, empty, peaceful, like it always did. But then, something unexpected. A flicker of movement. Clara blinked, leaned forward slightly, and eased her foot off the gas. Two small shapes stood ahead, right in the middle of the road. At first, she thought maybe they were shadows or part of some debris left behind by last night's storm. But as she drew closer, the shapes became clearer. Two puppies, German shepherds, tiny, no more than 8 weeks old, their little bodies dusty and underweight, their oversized paws too big for their wobbly legs. One had creamy white fur, the other a soft tan with a darker muzzle, Milo and Rusty. But what truly stopped her heart wasn't their presence, it was their stillness. They weren't barking. They weren't running. They weren't trembling in fear or confusion like most abandoned pups might be. No, they just stood there, like statues, like something sacred. And then Clara saw it. Rusty, the tan one, slowly rose onto his back legs. With effort, his small body shaking slightly, he brought his front paws together, folded them right there in the air, almost like a child might if they were pleading. The motion was delicate, purposeful, human. Clara's breath caught. Milo stood next to him, a step behind. He wasn't begging, he wasn't whining, but his tiny form was shaking. His ears were low and turned outward, and he kept glancing at Rusty as if to ask, "Are we doing this right? Will she understand?" Clara brought the SUV to a full stop. She'd seen a lot in her 13 years on the force. Bar fights, domestic disputes, rollovers, runaways, and more stray animals than she could even remember. But this was something else. Two tiny German shepherd puppies in the middle of a rural road, frozen in place. One upright on hind legs, one watching her with wide, silent eyes, begging, not for food, not for safety, for something else, something deeper. A strange stillness hung in the air, heavy and unmoving, as if even the wind was waiting. She turned the key and shut off the engine. The low hum disappeared. The world went quiet again, except for the faint whistle of wind through the open window. Clara opened her door and stepped out slowly. Gravel crunched beneath her boots. The smell of warm dust filled the air. But the puppies didn't flinch. Not a step back, not a twitch of fear. Just Rusty, still upright, paws clasped, body trembling but steady in his strange little pose. Clara's heart tightened as she took another step forward. This wasn't a random encounter. This wasn't chance. These pups were here with a purpose. They weren't strays wandering the road. They were here to find help, and as Milo gave a soft, nearly silent whine, just a breath of sound carried on the wind, Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She understood. They weren't lost. They were asking. The storm had blown in fast the night before. Angry winds, sharp cracks of thunder that shook the hills, flashes of lightning that split the sky. The fence behind the old pasture had given way. Trees had swayed and groaned in the darkness. And somewhere, beneath that storm, two puppies huddled close to the one being they trusted most, their mother, Luna. When the morning came, the rain was gone. The storm had passed. But something was wrong. Luna wasn't moving. She lay beneath a mess of fallen wood and broken fencing, half hidden under the rubble near the base of a crooked tree. A thick, jagged beam pressed across her lower back, pinning her to the ground. Her tan fur was caked with mud and splinters, her eyes dull and distant. Every breath she took was shallow, like it hurt just to keep going. Milo had been the first to move. His tiny paws scratched at the debris, pushing and pawing without understanding what he was doing, only that he had to do something. Rusty joined him, biting at sticks and branches, pulling at anything he could with his tiny teeth. Their bodies moved in frantic circles. They cried, high, thin yelps of confusion and fear. Not anger, not aggression, just pleading. They climbed onto her side. They licked her ears, her face. They nudged her with their noses as if trying to wake her up from a bad dream. But Luna didn't stir. She didn't growl. She didn't snap. She just watched them. Her eyes followed their every move, slow, distant, but full of something more than pain, something deeper, acceptance, a tired kind of sorrow, like she knew she couldn't protect them this time. Like she was saying goodbye. She watched the way Milo's ears drooped when he failed. She saw the way Rusty, even with his tiny legs shaking, refused to stop. And after what felt like hours when they had no more strength left, Milo stepped back. His chest heaved, his limbs wobbled. He turned to look at Luna, then Rusty. No words passed between them, but something did. They had to find help. So they left her side and stepped into the unknown. They crossed brush, mud, gravel, and open road. Tiny paws, trembling hearts. No idea where they were going, only that they couldn't come back empty. And now, in the middle of that lonely stretch of road, help had finally arrived. Milo held Clara's gaze for a long second, then turned silently and trotted toward the edge of the road, his little paws sending up faint puffs of dust. Rusty hesitated, ears twitching, body taut with nerves. Then he looked up at Clara, eyes wide with something between fear and hope. "Are you coming?" they seemed to ask. Clara didn't need more convincing. She crossed the shallow ditch, boots crunching dry gravel, the edge of her uniform brushing tall grass as she followed the pups into the brush. Despite their size, the pups moved quickly. They knew the way, as if they had taken this path more than once. They weaved through weeds and broken branches, thorns scratching at their sides, urgency in every tiny step. About 50 feet in, the thick brush gave way to a patch of sunlit ground. In that clearing, just behind a tangle of fallen limbs and shattered fence, Clara saw her. A dog, thin, still, pinned under broken wood, unable to move. Her eyes were only half open, her breath barely there. It was Luna. Clara stopped, her breath catching. Milo ran straight to his mother and pressed against her gently, whining with a soft, broken sound. Rusty grabbed a stick with his teeth, pulling at it, trying again to free her. Clara moved forward and knelt by the pile of wreckage. Luna's eyes met hers, tired, empty, but not afraid. No panic, no sound, just a quiet, heartbreaking surrender. This wasn't a mother in distress. This was a mother who had sent her babies into the world with her last hope, and was now watching them return. Clara didn't speak. She didn't move the debris yet. She just crouched there, breathing slowly, watching the faint rise and fall of Luna's chest, the weak flicker of her ears. the distant light in her eyes. Luna was still holding on, but just barely. Milo curled tightly against his mother's neck, his tiny body trembling. Rusty stepped back, dirt covering his little nose, and turned toward Clara. Then slowly, just as he had on the road, he lifted himself onto his hind legs. His front paws came together, trembling, a gesture full of hope, of desperation, of trust. Clara's heart clenched in her chest. Milo joined him a moment later, copying the same motion. Side by side they stood, wobbly, quiet, fragile. Ears down, eyes wide and locked on hers. They weren't barking. They weren't whining. Just asking. Not for food, not for shelter, just one silent word. Please. Clara didn't move. She couldn't. Her chest tightened under the weight of what she was witnessing. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Raw, vulnerable, pure. No words, no training, no manipulation. Just hope. She found herself whispering, barely audible. I hear you. Milo dropped back onto all fours, his energy spent. Rusty followed, but they didn't leave her side. They simply waited, tired, trembling, trusting. And Clara knew what she had to do. She looked once more at the tiny, trembling bodies beside her and then at Luna. This wasn't a rescue. It was a promise. Clara rolled up her sleeves. The wreckage didn't look stable, and she didn't know how long Luna could hang on. Every breath the dog took was shallower than the last. Her body lay limp, but her eyes, still open, followed Clara's every move. Milo and Rusty sat beside their mother, silent now, as if understanding what was about to happen. Their earlier desperation had shifted into something calmer, more patient, a quiet kind of trust. Clara placed both hands on the largest beam. It was thick, damp, and splintered, heavier than she expected. She braced her legs and lifted. Nothing. She tried again, gritting her teeth, shifting her stance. The wood creaked but held firm. Behind her, she heard the soft scrape of tiny claws on dirt. Rusty was tugging at one of the smaller branches. Milo nosed at the side of the heap, pushing against a piece of wood half his size. They were trying, still helping. Clara smiled despite herself. You're not giving up, she murmured. Then neither am I. With one more deep breath, she tightened her grip and pulled. The beam groaned, shifted slightly, then dropped with a thud to the side. Dust and old bark flew into the air. She quickly moved to the next piece, then another, her arms aching, hands scratched, bother focus locked on Luna's trapped body. Bit by bit, the pressure lifted. Luna didn't move yet, but her ears flicked. Her breathing eased just slightly, and Milo, standing just beside Clara, let out a soft, quiet whine, not of fear this time, but something else, something close to hope. The final piece of wood gave way with a dull, cracking sound as Clara dragged it aside. Dust floated up from the ground, caught in a sliver of sunlight, piercing through the leaves. She stepped back, breath ragged, arms shaking from the effort. Luna was free. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, painfully, she shifted her front legs and dragged her upper body forward. Her back legs stayed limp, too weak to respond. But there was motion, and with it life. Milo was the first to move. He rushed to her side, pressing his body against her with a soft whimper. Rusty followed close behind, nuzzling under Luna's chin. Luna, though barely able to hold her head up, tilted. It toward them, and in a movement so faint Clara almost missaid it. She wagged her tail just once. Then, with a deep, shuddering exhale, she let her head fall gently into the space between her two pups, her body folding into theirs, like she had finally made it home. Claret dropped to her knees, dirt and bark clinging to her pants. Her hands scraped and raw. Sweat traced down the side of her face, and her chest rose and fell with heavy, uneven breaths. But as she looked at the scene in front of her, Mother and children reunited in the dirt. She smiled softly, fully. Without hesitation, she pulled out her radio and called it in. "Dispatch, I've got an injured dog. Need immediate veterinary assistance. Near mile marker 47. 3 total. 2 pups, 1 adult, stable for now." As she looked down again, Luna's eyes found hers. There was no fear, no alarm, only a deep, quiet gratitude. And in that gaze, Clara felt something stir, a memory she hadn't touched in years. The reason she chose this job, not for the chase, not for the badge, but for moments like this, to protect the fragile things that deserve a chance. The animal clinic wasn't far, just 15 minutes down the highway, but for Milo and Rusty, the ride felt like forever. At the clinic, the vet team moved quickly. IV fluids, careful lifting, examining her spine, checking for internal injuries. Clara stayed with the pups in the waiting room, holding the door open each. Time they tried to peek in through the glass window. They didn't bark. They didn't play. They simply sat, ears low, tails still, eyes fixed on the door behind which their mother had disappeared. Clara stayed too. She stroked Rusty's head gently and whispered to Milo when he whimpered, promising them both that Luna was in good hands. When the vet finally came out, Clara stood immediately. "She's going to be okay," he said. "She's got a fractured hip and a lot of deep bruising, some internal swelling, but no organ damage. She'll need rest, care, and time, but she'll recover." An hour later, Luna was resting on a soft bed in the recovery room. Milo and Rusty were allowed in. They ran to her immediately, sniffing, licking, gently nudging her, until her tail gave the faintest wag. Then as Clara stepped inside, the 2 pups turned toward her. They didn't jump. They didn't bark. Instead, Milo walked up quietly and pressed his head gently against her knee, closing his eyes for a moment, his body soft with trust. Rusty followed, curling himself against her boot, tail wagging just once, slow and deliberate. Clara felt her chest tighten. These weren't tricks, weren't trained responses, just instinct, just heart. Luna remained at the clinic for just over 3 weeks. The fractured hip meant she needed rest, daily medication, and gentle rehabilitation. She couldn't walk far, and sometimes the pain still made her tremble, but she was healing slowly, steadily, and she wasn't doing it alone. Clara stopped by nearly every day. Some days she brought chicken broth in a thermos and let the pups lap it from a small bowl. Other days it was a soft blanket or a rubber toy. She always brought something, but most importantly, she brought herself. Her presence, her voice, the calm, steadiness of someone who cared. Milo and Rusty began to wait for her. The moment her boots stepped through the clinic doors, they would dash toward her, tails wagging, ears perked, eyes full of light. Luna would lift her head just slightly and watch. She no longer looked like a mother hanging on. She looked like a mother coming back. The bond grew quietly but surely. Clara didn't talk about it. She didn't have to. Even the clinic staff noticed. One morning, as Clara knelt toe-scratch behind Luna's ears, the vet looked over his clipboard and asked gently, "She's ready to go. Any idea where they'll be headed?" Clara didn't answer right away. She looked at Luna. Luna looked back, and in that silent exchange, everything was already decided. 2 days later, Clara opened the door to her small home on the edge of town. The furniture had been rearranged to make space. A dog bed rested beside the fireplace. Bowls were lined neatly by the kitchen wall. A basket of toys sat by the door. Luna stepped in slowly, her limp still visible but no longer uncertain. Milo and Rusty bounded in behind her, barking happily, exploring every corner like they already knew this place was theirs. Clara stood in the doorway, watching with quiet joy as the 3 of them settled in like they'd always belonged. She smiled to herself, heart full. She had worn a badge for 13 years. Protector, enforcer, peacekeeper. She had chased criminals, answered midnight calls, and stood between danger and the innocent. But none of that had prepared her for this. As she closed the door behind her and knelt down to the floor, she didn't feel like a cop. She felt like something simpler.